Aio, ki te aorangi. Aio, ki te whenua. Aio, ki te ao katoa. Aio, ki a tātou. E te kaihanga, tēnā koe. E Ranganui, e Papa Tuanuku, tēnā koroa. E ngā mate, haere, haere, haere. E te honga ora, e te haukainga. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia rana, talofa lava, maloa lei, nisan bulavanaka, whakalofa lahi atu. Namaste, namaskaram, kimcho, vanakam, satsri akal, niha ma, daja hao, anyang hasayo, mabuhai, bonjour, hola, assalamu alaikum, shalom, and welcome to Mount Roskill, everyone. This place is my home, and right now we're gathered together in one of the most diverse communities in the world. Within a radius of around about 3 kilometres from this very hall, you can encounter people from around about 160 different cultural backgrounds, speaking as many or more languages, each with their own backgrounds, stories and hopes. Put simply, this is a community that has been shaped by immigration. Māori first arrived here over 600 years ago, attracted by the security of our maunga, Puketapapa, Mount Roskill, and Te Tatua, Ariokiota, Three Kings, and the abundant food that was available from the coast and the nearby wetlands, the creek out here, Te Aoanga. In many ways, the things that subsequent communities who have migrated here have sought have not really changed. Pākehā settled here from the late 19th century as Auckland expanded. This area was first farmed and then urban development followed, led by the state housing initiatives of the first Labour government from the 1930s onwards. From the 1960s onwards, this community, particularly Wesley, where we are today, became a great hub for Pacific communities who began settling in New Zealand in large numbers, attracted by the promise of work, housing and opportunities for the next generation. And then from the 1990s onwards, people from every corner and continent of the world began to settle here. Some seeking advancement and opportunity, others shelter from war and destruction. Now, this story hasn't always unfolded smoothly. Sometimes there have been tensions and a lack of support to manage change. Sometimes the infrastructure hasn't been there to support growth. And sometimes people who have come here to work and settle have faced prejudice and exploitation. But overwhelmingly, we can say that migration, both economic and humanitarian, has made this place. Every community that has made Mount Roskill and New Zealand more broadly their home has contributed and made this a better place for all of us. In taking on this portfolio, I'm very aware of how the economic and social prospects of our country are shaped by our immigration settings. The decisions we make, how we manage the border, and how we work with the different interests in New Zealand to grow our economy and build a stronger future for everyone who calls Aotearoa their home. Immigration is always a balance. COVID-19 resulted in an unexpected and also and to set New Zealand up to succeed through our immigration system. As the MP for this place, Mount Roskill, I've spent my political career focused on ensuring that every person, regardless of their background, has the ability to flourish and reach their fullest potential in our country. And I've seen firsthand in this place the opportunities that immigration can provide to our society, our national culture and our economy, and many of you speak to that. So today I want to share with you my reflections on the first 3 months that I've had as the Minister of Immigration, what I've heard, what I'm focused on, and the path ahead for our immigration system. Up front, I want to acknowledge that there have been some pain points in the system as processing has commenced after those significant border closures. But in the context of nearly 100,000 applications received since the 31st of July, we are now seeing real progress back towards a steady state. Picking up new portfolio duties is always an interesting time, not least because of the fact that you need to get up to speed with the detail of new policy areas, and there are a lot of those in immigration, but also the large numbers of people and groups who are eager to meet and discuss their perspectives across all of these areas. I said at the very beginning that I'd spent a good proportion of my first few months in the role listening, asking questions and building my understanding, with help from many of you in this room, to understand the issues and the different perspectives on what should be the priorities within New Zealand's immigration system. And it's really important to note that from all of those conversations, there's no one single answer. Different people and different groups, even within this room, have different priorities and sometimes even conflicting views as to what is best. My job is to listen and then to make informed judgments that are consistent with the values and the mandate that our government has. Businesses have told me that they need certainty, a steady supply of highly skilled labour and the ability to put forward a competitive offer during times of massive global labour shortages. And make no mistake, every country in the developed world is dealing with those labour shortages in the same way that New Zealand is today. Workers have told me that they want opportunities to learn new skills, to step up into new roles, and for fair pay and conditions. Migrant communities have spoken to me about fairness, protection from exploitation, and opportunities to put down roots and invest in a future in New Zealand. All recognise the potential that immigration provides for our country, and everyone I've spoken to has acknowledged that we need an immigration system that enhances communities, builds economic growth and develops skills in our country. It's also clear that people want clarity on our immigration rebalance, the rationale and also the pathway forward, and I'd like to provide some of that clarity and certainty today. Much has been said about the pandemic, our economic response and the opportunities and challenges that it presents. And as I alluded to in the immigration space, it's provided an opportunity for us to pause, to evaluate the status quo, the impact of existing settings and the trajectory that we have been on. Migration has contributed around about 30% of New Zealand's population growth since the early 1990s. That's a very high rate compared to other countries. And this was fuelled in particular by increasing numbers of temporary migrant workers and students. Prior to the pandemic, temporary work visa holders made up about 5% of New Zealand's total labour force. That was the highest share by a very significant margin compared to all other OECD countries. Poland was next on 4%. And in some sectors such as hospitality, this reached as high as nearly 30%, or 20% in the case of seafood industries. Increasingly, as we looked at how the system was developing, often these temporary workers were at lower skill and lower pay levels, with nearly half of all essential skills visa approvals in 2019 at the lowest two skill levels. And what this has meant is that increasingly businesses in some of those sectors have been able to rely on lower skilled and lower paid workers rather than investing capital in productivity enhancing measures, or employing and upskilling New Zealanders, or paying better term pay and conditions. And I don't say any of that to blame any particular employers or sectors. Mostly people and businesses will just act rationally in response to the policy settings that we put in place. But that is very clearly what was unfolding. In the decade prior to COVID-19, we saw the number of people on temporary work visas in New Zealand double from little under 100,000 to more than 200,000. And as I say, this came with often limited investment. It also came with limited investment in some of the crucial infrastructure required to support population growth. Now, while immigration can be a critical component of building the infrastructure we need, for too long in New Zealand it lacked the accompanying plan and investment that we needed, and that is something that our government is now addressing. In the years leading up to the pandemic, we also saw how this approach, that is a focus on low skills and low wage migrant workers, could expose migrant workers to exploitation and abuse. Most exploitation victims identified in New Zealand are migrant men who are victims of labour exploitation. I want to be really clear that for the time that I have the privilege of being Minister in this role, this will be a priority for me. The levels of migrant exploitation that we have seen in our country are intolerable. A blind eye was turned for too long. Everyone in the system, including all of us in this room, politicians, government officials, unions, immigration advisors, sector groups, ethnic community leaders and business leaders, have a responsibility to stand up and be counted on this issue. Our government has moved ahead with improved powers for the Inspectorate and immigration officers, a migrant exploitation visa, an 0800 reporting number, a new employer accreditation system, and the migrant exploitation bill that Minister Priyanka Radhakrishnan is leading. We need everyone here to swing in behind. And if I can be as clear as possible, when groups and leaders within the broader immigration system come to talk to me about issues that are important for you, if you can and should be taking more of a stand on migrant exploitation and you're not, you will not receive a good hearing from me. We have to take responsibility and get on top of this issue, all of us. In the wake of the successful COVID response, reopening our immigration system presented a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change some of the shortcomings that have emerged in the system and to rebalance immigration to meet our country's needs, as I say, to drive more productivity and also to ensure that our migrant workers are treated with respect. It's about being consistent with our government's economic plan to build a high-wage, low-emissions economy that gives economic security in good times and bad. So what we're doing is putting in place the building blocks for an economy where all businesses, large and small, can thrive and pay higher wages, and also where our emissions in our economy shifts towards net zero. The world economy is in a period of structural and geopolitical change. International worker shortages, the war in Ukraine and global inflation are impacting economies right around the world. And at a time of such uncertainty, our immigration system has been at the centre of New Zealand's contribution to our humanitarian responses. And I do want to take a moment to talk about these. Much public dialogue about our immigration system in recent times, in fact almost exclusively, has been focused on economic migration, which is critical. But there have also been some very significant moves on the humanitarian side. Over the last year, we've granted over 1,440 emergency visas for those in Afghanistan. We've provided a pathway for Kiwis to give shelter to their families in Ukraine. And we've reopened the refugee quota to the full 1,500 intake, which doubles our contribution from where it was back in 2016. As a part of that intake, 200 places will be allocated to resettle Syrian refugees, including Kurdish minorities located in Iraq, Jordan and Lebanon, given the huge scale and prolonged nature of the Syrian refugee crisis and the coordinated international resettlement efforts. At the same time, we've doubled the refugee family resettlement quota to 600, providing more opportunities for families to be reunited, sometimes after unimaginable hardships. Collectively, these actions highlight New Zealand's international humanitarian commitments to provide protection to people and our willingness to play our part on the global stage. This has always been a proud legacy of the immigration system for Labour governments. Coming out of COVID, it is vital that we use our strong position to set ourselves up for success, socially, environmentally and economically. And that's where the immigration rebalance that I've spoken about comes in. If we boil it down, our new immigration approach through the rebalance is about fairness, productivity and security. On fairness, past government policies have, in my view, sometimes treated migrants simply as low-cost labour units, as commodities to be pumped into the system for economic gain. And that's not right. The simple fact is that each time an individual travels to New Zealand for work, it comes at a significant personal cost to them. It's only fair that we ensure that they have adequate access to accommodation, support and clarity, real clarity and honesty about the residence pathways that might be available to them. This will ensure that they can enjoy and make the most out of the opportunities available in New Zealand. It is important to note that this doesn't mean that everyone gets what they want. It means that we aim for a system where there are fair opportunities and we treat people consistently. On productivity, the rebalance has been designed to make it easier to attract and hire high-skilled workers, while supporting some sectors to transition to more productive and more resilient ways of operating instead of relying on low-skilled and low-wage migrant workers for so much of their needs. So we're making it easier to fill genuine skill gaps where New Zealanders can't be found. For highly skilled workers in the global labour shortage, we're ensuring New Zealand is an attractive destination with fast-track pathways to residency and simplified application processes. It also encourages investment in Kiwi workers and ensures we have an immigration system that improves, not suppresses, wages and working conditions for everyone. You see that in the median wage requirement under the AEWV. On security, securing New Zealand's economic future is a key priority for our government. COVID-19, climate change, the war in Ukraine have taught us that we live in an unstable world and we need to build a more secure economy that protects New Zealand households from external shocks. Our economic security as a country depends not only on addressing the near-term challenges of the cost of living, supply chain disruptions and labour shortages, but also on a clear and deliberate transition to a higher wage, low emissions economy, and the rebalance has a big role to play there. Getting the balance right in our immigration settings is crucial to achieving our goals. And I just want to be really clear that, in the view of our government, a sugar hit from low-wage, low-skilled migration at very high numbers as we've had in the past cannot be the answer to some of the problems and challenges that our economy faces. In fact, it's often unfair on those workers and will take our economy backwards. This is why we're making the investments in upskilling Kiwis and supporting businesses to transition and to make the investments and to support them through their needs with higher skilled immigration. We need an immigration system, in short, that works for New Zealand in the long term. No government can redesign the immigration system every time domestic and international economic conditions shift. That would be unsustainable, it would create uncertainty and ultimately not deliver the outcomes that migrants and businesses and all of New Zealand wants to see. What we can do, as we have with the rebalance, is to create a system that's responsive to these changes while giving New Zealanders confidence that there is a plan and robust principles underlying how we manage immigration in our country. And we are now seeing the rebalance having an impact. We're about 3 or 4 months into the new settings that kicked in from the 4th of July. The Accredited Employer Work Visa provides a streamlined, uncapped employer-led process that helps us fill skill shortages and compete internationally for top talent. More than 10,100 job check applications from employers have now been approved, allowing employers to go out and recruit internationally for over 62,000 positions. So in response to the question I often receive about whether the system is enabling employers to recruit internationally where there are skill shortages, I say that that is happening. 62,000 positions approved for recruitment over the last 3 months for employers. More than 31,000 working holiday scheme applications have been approved since March, and thousands more working holiday makers are expected to arrive in the coming months. And you'll be aware that we've now doubled the capped schemes, adding about 10,000 potential people to that pool. We've also seen a boost in opportunities for Kiwis, with 50,000 apprentices in trades and training, demonstrating that our focus on ensuring New Zealanders can take up some of the jobs traditionally filled by migrant labour is bearing fruit. Apprenticeships are more than 50% higher than when we took office, and there are 20,000 more construction workers than there were a year ago. Our young people are outperforming every other age group in terms of entering the workforce. Filled jobs for people aged 15 to 19 are up 18% compared year on year. And we are now seeing strong wage growth, with median weekly earnings from wages and salaries up by 8.8% in the June year, the largest annual increase since records began in 1998, and well ahead of inflation. The Green List, which opened up just last month, means employers can fill genuine skill gaps where there aren't workers available to take on these roles here in New Zealand, and provides the incentive of New Zealand residency to help attract top talent. New Zealand residency is an enormously attractive proposition for most people around the world, and is a key offering that we should use to our advantage. In addition, over recent months, we've made meaningful progress reopening visa categories in line with our new approach. Non-visa waiver countries and international student visas are open, and over 200,000 migrant workers will be able to call New Zealand home thanks to Residence Visa 2021. It is the biggest residency program that we have ever done in New Zealand. Processing is ahead of schedule, with over half of that number, over 100,000 people, already approved, and with the certainty of New Zealand residency. We've taken steps through the revitalised and streamlined immigration system to help relieve workforce shortages facing New Zealand businesses thanks to changes to the working holiday scheme and sector agreements. We've confirmed settings for post-study work rights. We've confirmed the reopening of the Pacific Access category in the Samoan quota, and we've delivered the largest increase in a decade in the REC scheme. However, we have heard clearly from businesses and others that they need the full suite of immigration tools to help them succeed. As part of our steps towards a revitalised and streamlined immigration system, I have accelerated work on the future direction of the skilled migrant category to ensure that it attracts and retains the medium to long-term skills New Zealand needs and provides clear residency pathways for migrants with these skills. Following this work, I am excited today to announce the reopening of the skilled migrant category. While Resident Visa 2021 and green listed roles have picked up a large portion of the demand for residency pathways, the SMC completes the picture and provides clear pathways for a wider group. The work that we have done will bring the SMC into line with the wider rebalance. We'll hand stuff out if you can't read what's up there at the moment. It'll be clearly focused on skills, and it will be much simpler than the previous system. To achieve this, the SMC will transition to a new, simplified, points-based system that will provide a clear, fair and transparent eligibility threshold, which provides more certainty to migrants and complements the new green list and highly paid residency pathways. Before the borders closed, the number of people eligible for the skilled migrant category significantly outnumbered the places that were available, leading to very long queues and uncertainty for migrants. In 2019, the year before the border closures, only about 40% of those who could have been eligible were actually processed. We're also seeing trends of applicants in jobs that needed lower levels of training or work experience, and migrants staying on temporary visas for long periods of time without a likely pathway to residency and the rights and protections that that provided. In short, their expectations were not being met, and it wasn't fair. The proposed new system will focus on granting residence to people who can fill skill gaps that would be hard or take time to develop from people already in New Zealand, even under the right conditions. The system sets a clear skill threshold and offers several ways for people to demonstrate their skill level through proxies such as wages, qualification and professional registration. Very highly skilled people will have a faster route to residence, while others will have a clear route if they work for a period in New Zealand. Critically, this is an important change, there will be no cap on the number of people who can gain residence each year under the SMC if they meet the skills threshold. This is a major shift. Instead of throttling demand artificially through the planning range and a constrained ballot process, we've worked to get the entry point settings right, and people who qualify will then be eligible to proceed. It is important that we get this right. And so now, as we move out of the COVID emergency period, where we often had to make quite quick changes to the system, we're going to move back to having full consultation on important settings like this. And MB will commence that consultation with yourselves and other interested parties and report back to Cabinet by early next year, with the aim of having these new settings in place by approximately mid-2023. I am clear, however, that we need to move forward while consultation on the new settings proceeds. And as such, I can confirm that in the interim, the skilled migrant category will reopen under the existing settings to ensure that there is a general residency pathway almost straight away. In 4 weeks from now, Immigration New Zealand will conduct a first selection based on the status quo of 160 points under the SMC. This means that those who have already submitted an EOI, who have made plans to come to New Zealand based on the current system, have an opportunity to apply at the current level. I think that's a fair approach for those people. For subsequent selections, we'll be raising the bar to 180 points to transition towards the future settings and our rebalance goals. The first selection will take place on the 9th of November 2022, just under a month away. People with existing EOIs will be advised about how to update them or how to withdraw and request a refund. As the MP for Mount Roskill, there are few immigration policies I'm asked about more frequently than the parent category, and some of you have been people who have met me on the street or at events to talk to me about this issue. As you'll be aware, it was closed under the previous national government in 2016, creating much uncertainty. Our government was set to reopen the category in early 2020 before border closures intervene. We recognise how important it is for migrants to have their parents with them and the positive contributions that can be made to families and their community. While I'm clear that the decision to move to New Zealand and settle here creates no automatic right or obligation for other families to also be able to settle, a well-managed parent category is an important part of helping families to settle, and it is time to reopen the category. And so I'm pleased to announce today that we are not just reopening the parent category, but we are also updating and modernising settings to improve access to the category. We'll be more than doubling the number of parent visas granted annually from the previous settings from 1,000 a year to 2,500 a year. The income threshold for sponsors will be lowered to 1.5 times the median wage for one sponsor supporting one parent and 2 times the current median wage for joint sponsors, and then half a median wage for each additional parent. Joint sponsorship arrangements will also be expanded to allow 2 adult children of the applicants to combine their incomes to meet the relevant threshold, rather than just partners. Taken together, these settings will enable significantly more people to access the parent visa category than under the previous settings. I know how important this is to many migrant families, so I'm especially pleased to announce that selections from the existing EOI queue will resume on the 14th of November. Resuming the selections from this existing queue is a priority, and EOIs will be selected in chronological order, and up to 2,000 visas a year will be granted to this group. Restarting the selections from the queue mid-next month allows time for applicants to update the EOIs or withdraw them and request a refund. People who withdrew the EOIs due to the previous income thresholds will be invited by INZ to resubmit to the queue. We appreciate that many families have had to wait a long time since submitting the EOIs, and that the COVID pandemic has lengthened the wait for the category to restart. As part of modernising the parent category, from today, EOI submitted will then go into a ballot rather than add to the existing queue. Moving to a ballot means people will avoid an increasingly lengthy queue, and they will know within 2 years whether they've been successful or not in progressing the EOI. We see in places like Australia lengthy queues that will potentially take up to 30 years to clear, and we think the balloting system will create more certainty for people in the system, which is a fair thing to do. These new EOIs will remain in the ballot for 2 years from the date that they are submitted. Up to 500 visas a year will be granted for new EOIs in the ballot. The ballot will then increase to 2,500 once the queue of existing on-hand EOIs has been worked through chronologically. I want to emphasise that there's no need to rush to submit an EOI for the ballot now. In fact, it will be more beneficial to submit an EOI closer to the time that selections from the ballot begin. The first random selection from the ballot will be in August of 2023, and after that, selections will take place every 3 months thereafter. These changes reduce the barriers for accessing the parent category and will support skilled migrants and their parents to settle in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I have a third announcement today, which is less about specific policy and more about how we work together. One of the recurring messages that I've heard from migrants is a feeling that their voice is often missing around policy discussions and the need for a direct line to speak directly to the Minister of Immigration. Therefore, I've decided, and today confirm my intention, to form a migrant community reference group. The group will provide a direct forum for migrant communities' representatives to directly share with me their perspectives and experiences of the immigration system, including strategy, policy, administration and outcomes. Together they, alongside other stakeholders, will be able to help frame my medium-term priorities for the immigration system. Establishing this channel is an important step in ensuring fairness in the system. By providing a seat at the table, migrant voices will be able to be heard directly alongside businesses, other sector groups and the advice that I receive from officials. And I'll be working to confirm group membership for the panel in the coming weeks. The reopening of these visa categories marks the conclusion of a notable chapter for our immigration system. It also provides the opportunity for us to turn our minds to the next medium and long-term considerations. The Productivity Commission's report provides a set of recommendations to help guide this thinking. In the coming months, the Government will provide an interim response to the Commission's findings, but I would like to signal here that a priority for me in the coming year is to commence a public discussion around some of the points raised by the Commission, including whether we can build more transparency into our immigration system. The Commission raised some interesting proposals around the possible value of a government policy statement on immigration. While no decisions have been made, I want to have an open discussion with you and others in the community around how we make the system as transparent, evidence-based and fair as possible. In 2023, I also intend to commence a review of the family and partners policy and will ensure that fairness is at the centre of that approach. There are many issues that are banked up in the immigration system, many policy areas and many areas for advocacy. But these areas, alongside the work that we have around the migrant and refugee resettlement strategies, will be key priorities that I will be putting resource into. Aotearoa New Zealand has successfully navigated COVID, supply chain pressures, global workforce shortages and many challenges over the past 2 years. We did that as a country by putting people first, by taking a wellbeing approach and by targeting our support to where it is needed most. Despite the mammoth feat of restarting our immigration system, we are now successfully seeing more visitors, more migrants and more residents invest in New Zealand and our economy. We'll continue listening to stakeholders, be it migrants, businesses, workers, unions and others, to ensure that our settings are working as intended. I hope that you can see, both from recent announcements and the new policies that I've confirmed today, that we are committed to creating and stewarding a system that is good for New Zealand and for the many migrants who seek to work and settle in Aotearoa and build our country as past generations have. We will now continue to build on the foundation set by our strong economic management through COVID and the reopening of our immigration system. Together, we can seize the opportunities for a secure future for all New Zealanders. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, and I look forward to any questions that you may now have. Thank you.